Have you ever wondered why your best intentions keep leading you down the same painful roads? Why you find yourself saying yes when you mean no, acting small when you feel big, staying silent when your soul is screaming? Here's what I've discovered after years of studying human psychology and my own patterns of self-betrayal. Real freedom isn't about doing what you want. It's about knowing who's doing the wanting. Most of us are living borrowed lives. We think we're making choices, but we're actually performing a script written decades ago by people who needed us to be safe, quiet, and manageable. Carl Jung called this the shadow, those rejected, forgotten, or denied aspects of ourselves that we've pushed into the darkness because someone, somewhere, told us they weren't acceptable. But here's the twist that changes everything. When you don't own your shadow owns you. Every time you bite your tongue when you want to speak truth. Every time you smile when you want to scream. Every time you say, "I'm fine," when you're dying inside, you're not being kind. You're feeding the very force that's slowly erasing you. Think about the voice in your head right now. The one that's commenting on these words, judging whether this applies to you, wondering if you should keep listening. Whose voice is it, really? Psychologists call them introjects, external expectations we absorbed so early and so completely that they masquerade as our own inner wisdom. But they're not wisdom. They're survival strategies. The voice that says, "Don't be too much," isn't protecting you. It's protecting the people who couldn't handle your fullness when you were small and vulnerable. The voice that says, "Keep the peace," isn't noble. It's the echo of a child who learned that conflict meant abandonment. The voice that says, "Prove yourself," isn't motivating you. It's the desperate whisper of someone who was told their inherent worth wasn't enough. These aren't your voices. They're psychological artifacts from a time when your survival depended on being what others needed you to be. But you're not surviving anymore. You're supposed to be living. Let me show you the archetypes, the masks we wear when we've forgotten who we really are. The performer curates every interaction for maximum approval. They've confused applause with worth, validation with love. They live a script written by committee, terrified that if people saw who they really were, the audience would leave. The consequence? They become incredibly skilled at being someone else. The pleaser has turned themselves into emotional infrastructure for everyone else's comfort. They overshare to create connection, overfunction to feel needed, and avoid conflict at the cost of their own soul. They've traded boundaries for belonging. The consequence? Chronic resentment toward the very people they're desperately trying to keep happy. The reactor is trigger-driven, constantly explaining and defending themselves to manage others' perceptions. Their identity is completely tethered to external reactions. They can be owned by anyone skilled enough to provoke them. The consequence? They hand their power to whoever shows up with the right buttons to push. The numbing strategist uses busyness, achievement, and endless distractions to avoid looking in the mirror. They stay loud, stay moving, stay proving, because stillness feels like death. But distraction doesn't dissolve the shadow. It feeds it. The consequence? Their pain doesn't disappear. It goes underground and grows stronger. Do you see yourself in any of these? Here's what's happening beneath all the performance. Under every people-pleasing smile, every desperate attempt to prove worth, every trigger-driven reaction, sits the same primal terror. The fear of being forgotten, unloved, unseen, not enough. Much of what we call kindness isn't love. It's fear wearing a gentle mask. Much of what we call strength isn't power. It's survival strategies we learned when we were powerless. We've turned ourselves into survival constructs, carefully engineered to avoid the one thing that terrifies us most: rejection. But here's the brutal truth no one talks about. The very strategies we use to avoid rejection are what make us rejectable. When you perform instead of being authentic, people fall in love with your performance, not you. When you please instead of having boundaries, people respect your function, not your humanity. When you react instead of responding from center, people see you as manipulable, not trustworthy. The masks we wear to feel safe are the very things that make genuine connection impossible. And modern culture, it's designed to keep you performing. Quick answers get more engagement than deep questions. Surface-level confidence gets more followers than authentic uncertainty. Curated highlight reels get more clicks than messy human truth. The whole economy runs on people who are psychologically owned by others' reactions. Social media algorithms literally feed on your need for external validation. Dating apps reduce you to a performance optimized for swipes. Work cultures reward compliance disguised as collaboration. Even mental health has been commodified into productivity tips and morning routines. The system needs you to stay leased to others' expectations, because owned people are easier to control, easier to sell to, easier to manipulate. But what if you stopped being available for ownership? Here's what happens when you don't integrate your shadow. Your identity remains rented by whatever triggered you last. Your relationships are chosen by your survival self, not your authentic self. Your career becomes a performance of competence rather than an expression of purpose. Your conflicts? They're just old wounds dressed up in new costumes, playing out the same unconscious scripts over and over again. Manipulation lands because unintegrated shame can be leveraged. Boundaries collapse because you're more afraid of disappointing others than betraying yourself. Life feels like constant defense because you're always protecting a false identity that was never really yours to begin with. The invisible prison persists, mistaken for personality, while your real self suffocates behind masks that stopped fitting years ago. You become a ghost, haunting your own life. But there's another way. There are those who've done the work Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the shadow rather than being ruled by it. The integrator sits with discomfort instead of performing their way out of it. They notice themselves mid-performance and choose differently. They replace the false voice with their authentic one. The consequence? Their presence becomes calm, grounded, and unmanipulable. The owner embodies wholeness. They don't trade truth for validation or authenticity for approval. They command respect without noise, without effort, without performance. They become untouchable because nothing is hidden from themselves. They've learned the most dangerous skill in a world built on psychological ownership. They cannot be owned. So here you are, at the crossroads that every conscious person eventually faces. Two paths stretch before you. Keep performing. Stay loud, stay busy, stay reactive. Let distraction feed the shadow that's been running your life from the darkness. Remain owned by whatever voice learned to speak loudest in your head. Live the rest of your days as a performer in someone else's play. Or begin possessing yourself. Sit in the fire of self-inquiry. Look at the parts of yourself you've been hiding, denying, running from. Integrate what you've rejected. Speak less but truer. Act from wholeness instead of woundedness. Become dangerous in the best possible way. Unshakable, unowned, unavailable for psychological manipulation. The choice isn't easy. Integration hurts. It means disappointing people who prefer your mask to your face. It means losing relationships built on your willingness to be small. It means confronting the parts of yourself you've spent years pretending don't exist. But here's what integration gives you in return. Freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind where you get to do whatever you want, but the kind where you know who's doing the wanting. Relationships with people who love your truth, not your performance. Work that expresses who you are, not who you think you should be. Conflicts that resolve because you're responding from wisdom, not reacting from wounds. The ability to walk through the world untouchable because you've touched everything in yourself. Want to start reclaiming yourself? Try this 3-question check whenever you feel triggered, whenever you notice yourself performing, whenever that old familiar anxiety starts to rise. First, who is responding right now? The real me or the survival self? Feel the difference in your body. The survival self feels tight, reactive, desperate. The real self feels spacious, grounded, curious. Second, what am I still carrying that doesn't belong to me? Notice the voices. Whose expectations are you trying to meet? Whose approval are you seeking? Whose rejection are you trying to avoid? Those aren't your voices. Third, what boundary or truth am I afraid to own in this moment? What are you not saying that needs to be said? What are you accepting that violates your integrity? What part of yourself are you hiding to keep others comfortable? Then practice one aligned act. Say less and mean it more. Hold a boundary without defending it. Walk away from what no longer fits, even if others don't understand. Choose alignment over applause. Choose authenticity over approval. Choose ownership over being owned. Here's what they don't tell you about shadow integration. When you stop being owned by others' reactions, you become genuinely dangerous to systems built on psychological control. When you stop performing your worth, you reveal how much of the world runs on people who believe they have to earn love. When you stop people-pleasing, you show others what boundaries look like, and some of them won't like the mirror you've become. When you integrate your shadow, you stop being useful to people who needed you to be small, wounded, and manageable. The most radical act in a world built on performance is showing up as exactly who you are. No masks, no scripts, no apologies for taking up space. This terrifies people who are still performing because your freedom reminds them of their prison. Your authenticity becomes a mirror they can't look into without seeing their own compromises. Your groundedness reveals their reactivity. Your boundaries illuminate their people-pleasing. Your peace exposes their chaos. And some of them will try to pull you back into the performance. They'll call you selfish for having boundaries. They'll call you cold for not managing their emotions. They'll call you difficult for refusing to dim your light to match their darkness. Let them. Their reaction to your authenticity is information about them, not instructions for you. The most revolutionary thing you can do in a culture built on psychological ownership is this: refuse to be owned. Stop performing for audiences that were never meant to define you. Stop carrying voices that were never yours to begin with. Stop trading your truth for temporary comfort. The world doesn't need another performer. It needs you to remember who you were before you learned to be someone else. It needs your authentic voice, not your practiced one. It needs your real boundaries, not your people-pleasing smile. It needs your integrated wholeness, not your fragmented performance. So here's my challenge to you. For the next week, every time you catch yourself performing, whether it's for your partner, your boss, your friends, or strangers on the internet, pause. Ask yourself, who would I be in this moment if I wasn't trying to manage anyone else's reaction? Then be that person. even if it's uncomfortable, even if others don't like it, even if it means disappointing people who've grown comfortable with your smaller self. Practice being ungovernable, practice being unownable, practice being authentically, unapologetically you. Because at the end of your life, the question isn't whether people applauded your performance. The question is whether you lived as yourself or as someone else's projection of who they needed you to be. The choice is yours. But choose consciously. Choose from your real self, not your survival self. Choose ownership over being owned. And if this resonates, if something in you recognized the truth in these words, subscribe to this channel. Because we're building a community of people who've decided to stop performing and start possessing themselves. People who understand that the most dangerous thing you can be in a world built on psychological control is authentically, unshakably you. The revolution starts with refusing to be owned. Will you join us?